4 institutional nodes, 1 form class. Widespread verification evidence across the Smithsonian, the Peabody, the Valentine, and the University of North Carolina Research Laboratories of Archaeology. 5th issue, expanded, with Peabody Object 85, 2410, 38153, from the Institute of Natural Philosophy and the Indigenous Mound Research Center. 4 institutions preserve different parts of one evidence network. The Smithsonian holds the dated Haywood County Anchor and its 1883 records. The Peabody contributes 2 physical comparators. The Valentine preserves the principal object corpus and its early numbered plate series, and the University of North Carolina preserves photographs and metadata that carry those images into a later documentary chain. Read together, the nodes do more than repeat a story. They independently verified that a varied family of ground stone effigies circulated through multiple institutional channels. That widespread distribution is positive verification evidence for the existence and the coherence of the form class. A node is more than a museum name. It is an independent custody and record chain that contributes a different kind of check. The network is strongest when the roles are kept distinct. Physical objects, dated registers, accession histories, original photographs, and later archival rephotographs do not carry the same weight, but they can verify one another. And the core finding follows from that. Repeated design vocabulary in separate custody chains is verification evidence. Shared catalog labels are not automatically independent evidence. Shared objects, shared dates, shared photographs, and distinctive compositional choices are. The method works on 2 levels. The first is direct form-class comparison. 7 visible features are scored from photographs: posture, forelimb configuration, the through-body aperture, muzzle form, base type, surface registers and their distribution, and base edge convention. The useful correction is that the aperture is not the primary diagnostic. Several different compositions create a void. Surface register carries the most weight. The second level asks a different set of questions altogether. Is the item a physical object or a photograph? Is there a dated acquisition or donation? How precise is the geography? And does the object repeat the same decorative grammar even when its posture and subject differ? 4 surface registers recur across the network: fine parallel banding, oblique chevron or herringbone hatching, a coarser diamond lattice, and punctation, a dense field of short gouges and pits. Their placement in separate zones follows a repeatable rule, and base edge convention is best read as a workshop practice that crosses compositions, rather than as a boundary between groups. The closest pair, the Smithsonian Great Bear and the Peabody Rearing Figurine. Both rear from a seated crouched posture. Both raise a forelimb and return it toward the head. Both create an arched body opening. Both carry an angular projecting muzzle. And both use the same 3-register incision system. The lattice moves from the Smithsonian object's base and lower limb to the Peabody object's head and shoulder. That difference is productive. It supports a shared design tradition far more comfortably than a claim for one identical hand. A second strong connection. The Valentine object, Catalog 600, entered as probable. The color photograph shows the same raised bent forelimb, the same angular head, the same body void, and the same Zone 2 register system. Chevron is confined to head and shoulder, while banding covers body and limb, with a clean boundary between them. Its stepped, rope-hatched plinth adds a workshop convention also seen elsewhere in the Valentine plate series. The accession identification remains a visual crosswalk, rather than a ledger identification. And a helpful different subgroup. This compact seated animal raises both paws to its muzzle and has no aperture. It is not a close match to the rearing pair, but it helps separate 2 different eating compositions in the institutional record, and it shows that the broader corpus was not built from one repeated template. The comparison becomes more interesting, not less, when differences are preserved. The newly integrated Peabody record adds a second and much earlier North Carolina stream inside the same institution. It is not a second example of the rearing animal. It is a rectangular ground stone plaque with a human figure and birds on the front, and an opossum on the reverse, recorded as donated by John H. Goodell in 1885. On the front face, a central human figure stands in relief with arms extended toward 2 birds. The figure and birds carry incised hatching, including a diamond lattice field on the lower body, while the surrounding ground is densely punctated. On the reverse, an opossum is shown in profile. Its body is worked with punctation. A cross-hatched zone appears toward the rear, and the lower edge carries close-set oblique marks. Three things follow. First, an early independent date anchor. The 1885 donation is only 2 years after the Smithsonian Register entries. It establishes an early Peabody custody branch without relying on the 1989 accession history of the rearing figurine. Second, a wider verified vocabulary. The plaque does not repeat the raised limb form, but it repeats major elements of the surface grammar: punctation, cross-hatching, zone treatment, and a hatched lower edge. And third, a useful internal contrast, which is the sharpest of the three. One Peabody object carries the catalog values fake and raw material. The other is neutrally classified as an effigy and is accompanied by a named donor, an 1885 date, dimensions, and North Carolina provenience. Two objects, one institution, opposite catalog language. The contrast shows why catalog terms must be read record by record, rather than treated as one museum-wide scientific finding. The Valentine and North Carolina records work like a relay. The Valentine holds the physical corpus and the original numbered plate prints. The research laboratories preserve later negatives that identify themselves as photographs of those originals. They should not be double counted as two independent physical provenances. They are still two institutional custody chains, and that documentary separation is valuable because it preserves views, captions, and numbering that can be checked against the surviving objects. Plate 50A, a recumbent quadruped with parallel banding on a rope-hatched slab. Plate 50B, a large seated animal on a tall plinth forelimb raised toward the chest, with a through-body aperture and a surface worked almost entirely in punctation. Plate 50C, two animals seated face-to-face, forelimbs meeting, an aperture between them. And plate 37, a quadruped standing over a prone human figure. Banding, chevron, and short cross strokes are separated into zones while the slab edge is hatched, which yields a cross-node observation. Plate 37 and the Goodale plaque both combine human and animal imagery, although in different compositions. Plate 50B and the plaque both make punctation a major field treatment. The point is not identity. It is the recurrence of a recognizable visual grammar across independent institutional records. So what does widespread institutional evidence verify? First, a real historical corpus, physical objects, early register entries, a dated 1885 donation, original plate prints, and later archival photographs all exist in separate institutional chains. The corpus is not dependent on one modern catalog or one recollection. Second, a coherent decorative grammar, banding, chevron, diamond lattice, punctation, and hatched edges recur across different postures and subjects. Their distribution changes, but the vocabulary repeats in pattern ways. Third, internal variation, rearing, seated, recumbent, quadruped, paired, human-animal, and double-sided forms. Variation inside the network argues against reducing the corpus to one repeated. The sequence is easier to understand when the institutions are read as a timeline. Formal payments and specimen descriptions, catalog annotations, an independent 1885 donation, and later 1989 cataloging events are different kinds of acts. Placing them in order keeps one kind from silently replacing another. Signed certifications and catalog notes are not interchangeable. The federal vouchers are dated, signed acts under an appropriation. The later ledger annotation is unsigned, and records no measurement, no comparison, and no test. And capability is not object-specific attribution. Emmert's demonstration that local people could make similar articles establishes capability. It does not, without a link to the purchase pieces, identify which specific objects were made in that demonstration. The three surviving method accounts also vary: clay and stain, iron tinctured water, and pine knot smoke. And a contemporaneous written denial by Merritt Burnett was never entered beside the adverse annotation. This paper therefore treats fake, imitation, and fraudulent antiquity as historical catalog language to be tested, and not as laboratory conclusions. And what the network does not yet settle: antiquity. Institutional distribution verifies existence and historical circulation. It does not date manufacture, exact provenience. The Smithsonian Bear has the Count Level Haywood anchor. The Goodale plaque has North Carolina only, and the rearing figurine has no public provenience below state level. Neither Peabody object should be relabeled Mount Pisgah without accession file evidence. One hand or one workshop. The recurring vocabulary is compatible with a shared tradition, but differences in register placement placement, base construction, and proportion remain real and independent proof of fabrication. Every institutional use of fake or imitation is fully probative for the fact that the label exists. It is not by itself a material test of the object. Repetition of a catalog judgment across later records may reflect transmission as easily as independent analysis. And the fastest routes forward measure the pitch of the banding and the lattice and compare tool width, stroke order, and microscopic signature. Read the Peabody accession ledger and the Goodale papers for the plaque. Any captee, dealer, or earlier owner would sharply improve its role. Obtain the accession file for the rearing figurine, naming donor, source, and prior custody, and build a shared image matrix with accession number, institution, date, anchor, locality, material, posture, registers, edge treatment, and toolmark metrics. That is what turns the museum network into a reproducible dataset. The positive center of the paper is this: the most widespread proof is verification evidence for existence, for circulation, for compositional coherence, and for institutional independence. Antiquity remained a separate question, but it is now a question about a documented network of objects, not an isolated curiosity. Object identifications marked probable are visual crosswalks, not museum ledger identifications. Photographic observation is not physical examination. The Goodale plaque is entered from the public catalog record. That record gives North Carolina, not Haywood County, and not Mount Pisgah. Consultation with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians Tribal Historic Preservation Office should precede any public cultural identification of material from this locality. Source finds and corpus compilation credit: Samantha Waddell, the Institute of Natural Philosophy, and the Indigenous Mound Research Center.